What happens when two $200 million Russian Shadow Fleet tankers load oil at one of Moscow's most important ports, and Ukraine sends a swarm of long-range drones carrying 3,000 kilograms of explosives across 1,000 kilometers of defended airspace? In late September 2025, the answer was made clear. One of Russia's largest export hubs was set ablaze. 2 tankers were crippled, and a strategic blow worth billions of dollars landed directly on the Kremlin's war economy. At 12:25 a.m. this late September 2025, the Primorsk Oil Port on Russia's Baltic coast was running routine night operations. 2 massive tankers, part of Russia's Shadow Fleet designed to skirt international sanctions, were preparing to load millions of barrels of oil. At that same moment, hundreds of kilometers to the south, the screens of Russian air defense radars lit up with anomalies. Operators at a Nebo-M long-range VHF radar station suddenly detected more than 70 separate signals approaching Russian airspace. The signatures were unusual: low radar cross-sections, inconsistent trajectories, and spread across a 1,000-kilometer front. Together, they represented the potential to deliver more than 3 tons of high explosives. The alert was quickly escalated to the Leningrad Oblast Air Defense Command. The 91N6E Big Bird Wide Area Surveillance Radar confirmed the picture, and air defense sirens began to sound. For the Russian generals overseeing the region, this was exactly the type of situation their anti-access/area denial network was designed to handle. Russia had invested heavily in a layered, integrated air defense system around St. Petersburg and the Baltic coastline. As the alert spread, the network automatically began to activate. The 92 N6E Gravestone engagement radars of S-400 batteries locked onto incoming tracks. At lower altitudes, Panzer S-1 batteries responded with both surface-to-air missiles and rapid cannon fire. The twin 30mm 2A38M cannons could unleash up to 5,000 rounds per minute into the night sky, creating a wall of steel designed to annihilate any low-flying targets. To Russian operators, this seemed like a major air raid, but in reality, what they were seeing was only the first stage of an elaborate deception. The drones were not heading directly for the Primorsk Oil Port. Instead, their flight paths had been carefully programmed to split across multiple directions. Villages such as Zelovsk, Tosno, Pakhovskoye, and Usmino were deliberately chosen as decoy routes. Several drones were aimed toward the Lomonosov district in Leningrad Oblast. At the same time, more drones were tracked toward districts in St. Petersburg, including Vsevolozhsky, Tosnensky, Gachinsky, Lomonosovsky, and Pushkinsky. These were precisely the zones most heavily defended by Russia's S-400s. The deception worked as intended. In an air defense shelter in Gachinsky, a young Russian lieutenant reported confidently that his sector was clear and that all targets had been destroyed. This routine report, climbing up the chain of command, gave Russian generals the false impression of victory. In reality, they had been lured into the largest miscalculation of their careers. The Ukrainian plan had assigned more than 70 drones for the opening phase alone. 35 AQ-400 Scythes drones acted as the main decoys toward St. Petersburg. The remaining 40 drones spread across Leningrad Oblast, creating widespread radar clutter. At the core of this force were 15 UJ-26 Bober ER drones, modified for extended range and equipped with 40-kilogram warheads. Their primary target was Primorsk. The mission depended on at least a fraction of these drones slipping through the layered Russian defenses. Every supporting system played a role. The Bober ERs had been specially chosen because the standard Bober's range was insufficient for the 1,000-kilometer one-way strike. The ER models, however, carried extra fuel tanks and optimized engine software, making the long-range strike feasible. Electronic warfare support came from Banshee 7 platforms, themselves built on extended-range drone bodies. Instead of warheads, they carried advanced jamming pods and antennas. Their task was to accompany the Bober strike drones the entire way, masking them from Russian tracking radars. Meanwhile, the AQ-400 Scythes, built with simple plywood bodies, acted as disposable bait. Cheap to mass-produce and difficult to track, they were perfect for saturation attacks. At midnight, the entire swarm lifted off from multiple sites inside Ukraine. For the first several hours, they maintained complete radio silence, relying on preloaded terrain-following maps to fly low along riverbeds and forest cover. Several drones were lost to terrain collisions or technical malfunctions, a risk calculated into the plan from the start. Once inside Russian territory, the deception phase began. The 91N6E Big Bird radars tracked the scattered formations, automatically prioritizing the 35 Scythes heading towards St. Petersburg. S-400 launchers fired salvo after salvo of 48 N6 series missiles, knocking down plywood targets one by one. Russian operators believed they were successfully repelling a major strike. In Ukrainian terms, this was a planned sacrifice, opening lanes for the real attackers. The remaining 40 drones played cat and mouse with Panzer and Buk systems across Leningrad Oblast. In one documented exchange, a Panzer battery near Volosovsky locked onto a low-flying Bober. Its tracking radar had captured the target precisely, but a nearby Banshee 7 electronic warfare drone jammed the frequency so powerfully that the operator's screen went white. The lock failed, and the Bober continued toward its target. Attempts to shoot it down with cannons also failed. This back and forth repeated through the night. Russia's defenses were fierce, and by the time the engagement ended, 33 drones had been destroyed. Crucially, however, 7 of the Bober ER drones remained operational. These 7 carried the mission's decisive payloads. At 4:45 a.m., Primorsk's own Panzer battery detected 7 fast-approaching signals. In panic, it launched 57 E-6 missiles, but the drones were too low, too fast, and too close. The 7 Bobers split into 2 groups in their final maneuver. 3 targeted the pumping station. 4 went for the tankers waiting at the piers. 1 Bober was intercepted, but 2 struck the pumping station directly. The first carried a thermobaric warhead, detonating in the control building and creating a pressure wave that blew apart its walls. The second hit the main pipeline manifold, severing vital infrastructure. Meanwhile, the other 4 Bobers locked onto the tankers. 2 struck the Kapitan Lob, 1 below the bridge, destroying electronics, and another into a cargo tank filled with oil. The other 2 targeted the Sergei Gorshkov, 1 hitting the engine room and another its loading manifolds. Additional impacts were recorded on 2 other tankers at the port, the Kusto and Kailun, both Aframax-class vessels linked to Russia's Shadow Fleet. The Kusto, managed by Solstice Corp, had a deadweight tonnage of 115,000. The Kailun, registered to Axaronix Limited, had a deadweight tonnage of 110,000. Both were operating under suspicious flags of convenience. The timing of the strikes coincided with loading completion. Fires ignited almost instantly. Within 42 seconds, a second explosion rocked the pumping station. Control systems failed. Emergency shutdown commands could not pass through damaged circuits. Drone strikes on loading arms caused uncontrolled fuel leakage. By dawn, Primorsk was engulfed in flames. 2 tankers were burning at the piers. The pumping station was destroyed. The control center was knocked offline. Hours later, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced that 221 Ukrainian drones had been shot down across the country and that all attacks were repelled. Satellite imagery of Primorsk contradicted this narrative. The fires alone caused billions of dollars in damage. Primorsk accounted for roughly 20% of Russia's seaborne oil exports. The Aframax tankers struck in this operation carried around 700,000 barrels each. Combined with the port's annual throughput of $15 billion, the damage represented a major blow to Moscow's war financing. The economic losses were immediate. With Primorsk handling an average of 1 million barrels per day, the temporary shutdown meant a daily revenue loss estimated at $70 to $80 million. The effects extended beyond the port. St. Petersburg's Pulkovo Airport activated emergency diversion plans, rerouting 11 aircraft. Air traffic controllers struggled with crowded radar screens as UAV wreckage fell across Leningrad Oblast. From a technical analysis standpoint, Ukraine's concept achieved 3 breakthroughs. First, it solved the range problem through extended-range drones. Second,